Context is everything here, but generally speaking, how receptive are you to being called friend or pal by someone you barely know or even someone who is younger than you? Story 1. If someone says, "Thanks, buddy," that is positive. However, if you make a claim and someone responds with "Okay, buddy," or "Okay, bud," it can be demeaning, implying that you are immature or a child. Story 2. I'm Canadian, so usually something like, "Hey buddy, how are you?" or "What's up, bud?" is vernacular here. Story 3. In Appalachia, it is normal, especially for older men, to start a conversation with, "What do you say, buddy?" It does not bother me. Story 4. It is a very common way to address people you do not really know where I am from, so I do not even notice. Interchangeable with big man, mate, and pal. Story 5. Haha, I call a lot of guys bud or buddy, but it is honestly from a place of care and brotherhood. Story 6. I am confident enough that things like this do not bother me. I do not have the emotional capacity to let things like this affect me because I have reserved most of it for my road rage. Story 7. There is a colleague at work who desperately wants to be my supervisor, and he says, "Hey bud," every day. Story 8. I am Canadian. I get called and call others bud and buddy so often it feels like a reflex. I have zero issue with it. Story 9. In the most general context, such as in a store, I would ignore it because for some people it is probably just their casual version of sir. Story 10. I say it to people all the time. My justification is that it is merely something that I say. It is not that deep. Story 11. Weirdly, I am fine with bud, but buddy feels patronizing. Probably because I only use it with young kids or my dogs. I call most people dude. I am English, so it does not have the American stoner association. This is largely because I have a terrible memory and forget people's names. Story 12. I try not to care about other people's nonsense. If they say it friendly, it is friendly. If they say it rudely, it is rude, just like any other indefinite pronoun. Story 13. A female Walmart greeter, probably a few years younger than me, called me buddy with a hard B last month, and I was shocked for about 2 days. Story 14. I can only think of maybe someone's father 30 years my senior calling me buddy. In that context, who cares? Maybe a man behind the counter at a delicatessen, but usually I would get boss instead. Boss is good. Story 15. It depends on tone, context, and who is saying it. My dad has called me bud or buddy since I was a kid. I call some of my friends bud, and they refer to me as bud. There is absolutely no issue, and no issue if some random person refers to me as bud in a pleasant, nice tone of voice. If some random person refers to me as bud with an angry or annoyed tone, I would think, what is their problem? What did I do to upset them? Story 16. I would say, "What's up, man?" If that person tries to continue the conversation further, I would probably say, "What's up? I have things to do. Bye. I don't have spare time to talk to people I don't know, but I can say hi." Story 17. I do not see what there is to react to be honest. It is no different than someone saying, "Hey man," or something similar. It is completely insignificant to me, so I am somewhat surprised it is even remotely controversial. Story 18. In the southern United States, many men say buddy to each other frequently. It depends on the time and the subject. Personally, it does not bother me because I am not a child with insecurities. Story 19. I am from the southern United States. If I became upset at every random nickname, I would accomplish nothing. It is best to ignore it, pretend it was not said, and continue as normal. Story 20. I find it more and more common. It does not bother me at all. It is like a dog wagging its tail, just a signal that it is friendly. Story 21. I am not your friend or companion. It has always made me uncomfortable when people become overly familiar like that, especially nowadays. Story 22. There is definitely a regional element to it. In the southern United States, if a woman calls me hon or honey, I am not bothered by that. Similarly, if I am in the United Kingdom or Australia and someone calls me mate, it does not bother me. However, If a man in Oklahoma calls me mate, I will have some questions. Story 23. In the United Kingdom, where I am from, buddy is a diminutive term. It depends on who is calling me that. A friend? Yes, anything is fine. A stranger in the street? It is okay. Someone who is serving me in some way? Absolutely not. I cringe when a young person says buddy to an older person they are serving. Story 24. I don't like it. This is an interesting story, but probably off topic. I'm black, and one day I was walking back to my car when a random middle-aged white man, who I didn't know, said out of the blue, "Hey, buddy, could you help me out and take a look at my car?" Was like, no. I tried very hard not to see it as racist, but I couldn't think of any other explanation. I don't know much about cars, but the assumption grated on me so much that I'm telling this story 40 years later. This happened in North Carolina around 1982 or 1983. Story 25. My wife used to do that when she was irritated with me, but after I told her that I found it very disrespectful enough times, she stopped. Story 26. Depends on the person and their intent. I used to have a boss who did not care to learn the names of his employees and would call everyone bud or buddy. Story 27. It does not bother me necessarily, but if I call a grown man bud or buddy, it is definitely out of condescension. Story 28. Bud or buddy is fine, particularly here in Canada. I bristle a little bit at boss. It always comes off as condescending for some reason. Story 29. I do not think about it until I get hit with the word brother from white men. I never hear them call anyone brother, but they call me brother with full confidence. Story 30. React like a real man. Do not react. Know that you are a man and let it be. It is no different than the female postal worker who calls everyone honey. Story 31. I am generally a kind, upbeat person. Even when people try to be mean, I simply respond as if they were not. It usually throws them off. Kindness works more than you would think. Story 32. This upsets me because my children consider the word buddy a serious insult in my household. This happened after I had an altercation with a police officer and called him buddy several times. It is not a term of affection in our family language. Story 33. I see it as a sign of aggression, and I generally dislike that person immediately. That being said, I am guilty of doing this as well. Story 34. Totally depends on the tone and context. If it is friendly and casual, buddy can feel fine, like someone trying to be approachable or break the ice. But if it comes from someone younger or a stranger and has even a hint of condescension, it can feel dismissive or patronizing very quickly. It is one of those words that walks a fine line between friendly familiarity and subtle put-down. So yes, I am receptive, but I am also listening very closely to how it is said. Story 35. It depends on the tone, of course, or in relatable masculine construction terms, the color of hard hat that is hollering at me. Story 36. I live in Australia, and coming from another Australian, it would probably be weird and borderline insulting. I would likely accept that this person was choosing an antagonistic relationship and therefore they will receive no benefit from me in this interaction. Australians would use mate, whereas Canadians would use buddy. Can still be a jerk move, depending on tone and context. If you are Canadian, buddy in a friendly tone would be fine. Story 37. Mostly positively, it is rarely used condescendingly to me or by me. I am pretty earnest with my buddy usage. As I type this, I feel more and more like a South Park Canadian, but that is just how many of us speak up here. Story 38. Almost all the times I have experienced anything like this in real life, it has been friendly. I know it can be condescending or insulting, but it has never warranted a reaction at all in my experience. Story 39. When I was a kid in the 1960s, my barber called me Butch. For some reason, it annoyed me greatly. Even to this day, when I think about it, it still bothers me. Story 40. I use the words bud and buddy quite a lot as friendly greetings to people who are not friends. I have done this for about 20 years, if not longer. There is no familiarization in it, and for me, it is a non-issue. I use these words and people use them toward me. They can be a greeting, a thank you, or anything you want them to be. It is the same as using the word mate. It is just friendly. I am from the United Kingdom. Story 41. With familiar relationships, I think nothing of it, the same as if someone had called me dude or boss. I have dozens of texts between myself and family and friends using these terms bud and buddy freely. My younger brother absolutely lost it on me when I said thanks bud, in response to him doing me a favor. I do not get it. Story 42. I act confidently while maintaining eye contact. Then squeeze your hand shut. Never break eye contact or you have lost. Story 43. Age 45. My best friend and I call each other bud or buddy in conversation. That is pretty much it. If anyone else were to do so, outside of my close male friends, I would probably look at them strangely. Story 44. Better than being called an unpleasant person. Anyone who reacts to being called something positive like buddy, mate, friend, or brother is just looking for an excuse to be unpleasant. Story 45. I don't think twice about it. It's just a greeting. Some people are just looking for reasons to feel disrespected or offended. Story 46. I live in a small city and know all kinds of people in town, and we generally all get along pretty well. Familiar terms are just how people talk, at least among each other. It is a way of recognizing that we are all the same kind of people or dealing with similar situations. In a simpler way, it is just being neighborly with people we know and like. If someone took offense, which I cannot recall ever happening, it would say more about that person than anything else. You would just know that there is someone with issues, and you would need to be a little careful around them. Story 47. All good, buddy. But I guess it can be used sarcastically to undermine someone too. Was it a hey buddy? Or an okay there, bud? Story 48. Bud. Yay, I am a beer. Buddy. Yay, I got a new friend. If you cannot tell, I am painfully ignorant about many things. I know how it is, but my brain does not process it that way, and I do not know how to change that. Story 49. I do not care. If I want to acknowledge someone, I do it no matter how they address me. If I do not, I ignore them. So, buddy is fine like any other casual or normal term. Story 50. When sir sounds too formal and my good man seems pretentious, buddy is a quick and friendly way to casually interact with a stranger or nodding acquaintance. It's all good. Story 51. These were terms that were popular when I was much younger. I am 47, and when I was in my 20s, many people referred to other men as buddy. I would also point out that I lived in Canada for several years, and that term was extremely common in the early 2000s. It did not bother me at all. Story 52. I just assume they forgot my name. Most of the time when I use bud, dude, or man, it is because I cannot remember their name. It is not a big deal. Story 53. I suspect this is regional. I do not police the way people talk, especially when they are trying to be nice. Story 54. Many years ago, a coworker of mine used to greet me with, "Hey Charlie," and I would say, "Hey back." Over a year went by when she said, "I just found out your name is not Charlie." I said, "No, it isn't. I just thought you meant it like, hey, buddy." Story 55. I am sure that I could not care less, but I am not sure how I would go about doing that. Who cares what people call me? Story 56. Here in Austria, some people call others bro, especially when they want something. I tell them I am not from here or where they are, and we are not related. Story 57. My dad, along with two close friends, calls me bud or buddy. I have been hearing it for half my life, so I actually really like it. I think people overthink the term. The only time it is not good is if it is deliberately delivered with snark or sarcasm. Story 58. Bud happens to be my nickname, so it never phases me at all. It does seem like I get called that frequently by strangers. Story 59. I take it as a term they feel comfortable with the information they are providing. I read more below to understand that whatever they are telling me is real. Story 60. I mean, stuff like that doesn't bother me. I truly have an inability to care what other people think of me. Story 61. I would not outwardly react to anything, but if someone younger than me, whom I did not know, called me bud, it would be difficult to take them seriously after that. The context or situation could change things, as that is a large dependency in this. Story 62. I am terrible with names, especially if I have almost no interactions with someone. I do not go around calling people bud or buddy. I just use dude if I am going to call them anything. I do not have a problem with people calling me that. I do not particularly care. It is not like we are friends or anything, and I do not expect them to know my name. Story 63. I could not care less. I am a construction worker in New York City who has worked on projects that employed hundreds to sometimes thousands of workers. It is very common to use terms such as bud, buddy, my man, brother, and sister in passing throughout the project. It is no big deal. Story 64. I acknowledge with a slightly positive response, such as, what's up, buddy, brother, or man, as that person has indicated they also view me positively. Story 65. I personally do not mind that. It is just a saying. In some parts of Yorkshire, some men will call other men love. Story 66. Why would it matter? I call my friends bud or my buddies. Maybe it is regional vernacular, but I feel like it is a nice neutral identifier even for a stranger, like, hey bud, you dropped this or something. I do not see it as any different than dude or homie or any other slang. Story 67. It's just a term. Why would any sane male care? In my humble opinion, if a man is getting upset over what term someone used, then they have deeper psychological issues that may need to be addressed. In normal conversation with people I know or do not know their actual names, I have used hey followed by any one of buddy, bud, guy, dude, man, fella, friend, pal, jack, broem, or you. For example, hey buddy, what are you doing? Or, hey broem, how are the trees doing? Story 68. I had a senior position at my last job, and one of the frontline employees would always call me Bud. I had to tell him to stop. I call my dog Bud, and you are not my dad. Story 69. Oh, I am your buddy? People who say this want something from you, but they are not your friend. Story 70. Unless their tone or wording suggests condescension, I will generally consider that as a friendly greeting. Story 71. I don't even acknowledge it. I just continue with whatever I need or whatever we are doing. Usually, it is a cashier or service person who does it. Story 72. He probably does not know my name, or if he did, he forgot it. I am not going to embarrass us both by acknowledging it. Once he knows he has my attention, I will proceed normally as if he addressed me by name. Story 73. I always appreciate the phrase, how are we today? My response is always, we are great, thanks. How are we? Story 74. Like the beer, it is totally generic. I would not choose to be called bud or buddy, but I am not going to object either. Story 75. My father used to tell people, I'm not your buddy. I have to stop myself from saying the same thing. Story 76. I've never been a fan of either one. I do not like to use it, and I do not like being addressed as such. I feel belittled, like they think I am a toddler. My exception is for animals and pets, especially dogs. I do not know why bud or buddy is my default address. It just is. Maybe that is why I do not like being called it. Story 77. Like you said, context is everything. Being called bud or buddy by someone you do not know can potentially be belittling. It really depends on the way they say it and the interaction. If someone was older than me, I would probably take some offense to it depending on the context. If someone younger than me calls me buddy, I probably would not bat an eye. Story 78. I don't say anything or just respond in conversation to whatever they say. I live in Canada, and it's not strictly used for boys here. It is used very generally by anyone, no matter how well you know them. If you hold the door open, you might get told thanks, bud, even if they are 10 years younger than you. Story 79. It's contextual, you're right. One of the things I focus on is whether or not I respect someone's opinion enough to give any weight to the words they say. If I'm getting condescension, and I do not care about this person, they're better off talking to a brick wall. If a person I care about or need to care about, like at work, is giving me condescension, maybe we have a problem. I'm a professional, and if I'm not treated with the respect I deserve, I won't hang around. If someone tries to bring me down to their level, I'm going to remind them that not only are they not my peer, they are insignificant under my feet. I keep a snarky comment or two ready and prepare an analysis to respond sharply. Some of my favorites are, I have boots older than you. If high school was 5 minutes longer, you'd still be there. I've heard better, but I haven't heard worse. Didn't know they stack things that high. That's a big word for an 8-year-old. Just because I'm your mom's buddy doesn't mean I'm yours too. Keep it up and I'll give your mom a son she actually loves. And many more. Story 80. I conclude the interaction if it is transactional. I do not say many words and leave as soon as possible, leaving them to their karma. Story 81. See you, buddy. It is fine. However, I have noticed that younger people I have worked with do not like it because they say it feels demeaning. When I first moved from the city to a more rural part of my home state, it used to bother me when people called me buddy. Now, at 43, I find it endearing. Story 82. In Australia, it is all about the tone in delivery. Mate can mean a close friend. Cunt can mean mate. Buddy can be friendly. Buddy can also be condescending. Story 83. To be honest, it basically never happens. I hear boss a lot, which is equally likely to be respectful or sarcastic. Either way, I just dismiss it. It does not mean anything or matter at all. Story 84. I find it's easiest to just throw down in fistfights with anyone who calls me anything besides my legal name, regardless of the situation. Hot tempers are no big deal where I'm from, and as long as you don't break their jaw or orbital socket because they called you bud, then you typically only get charged with a misdemeanor. But seriously, who cares? I'm a 42-year-old grown man. What do I care what someone I barely know calls me? I'm not going to risk my livelihood or the 2 government-issued professional licenses that I use to feed my family. I have far too much to lose to get hot-tempered over something so dumb. I call people bud and buddy all the time and have never had anyone want to fight me for it. Story 85. I'm Canadian, and that South Park episode is on point. Now, calling someone a goof in an insulting way, that's some serious disrespect. Story 86. I am Canadian, and that South Park episode is on point. Now, calling someone a goof in an insulting way, that is some serious disrespect. Story 87. Like you said, context is everything. Negative context. If they did something bad to me, then I would say, I'm not your friend. I don't want them thinking getting familiar with me solves any sort of issue. Neutral context. Some random guy just trying to squeeze past me who says, excuse me, friend. I won't even think twice about it. Positive context. Some random guy offers me a slice of his pizza and says, hey friend, want a slice? Well, I'll now take a bullet for that guy. We are real friends. Story 88. Does not bother me usually. Some kid trying to be too big for his britches or overly familiar, whatever. He may be trying to be overly familiar or act as if he is on my level or above me. Saying bud or buddy does not make it so. Story 89. Depends on tone. Usually it is condescending based on differences in age, depth of voice, experience, or subtle instigation. Story 90. It depends on their tone. If they are saying it amicably and it sounds sincere, then I take it as a compliment and a form of camaraderie. If they are saying it condescendingly, I return their condescension right back at them. Story 91. If someone is well-intentioned with their words, I do not trip out. I generally use brother or bro when I am trying to politely talk to a male I do not know. Unless they are much older or elderly, then I say sir. For example, hey, excuse me, bro, were you using that bench? Okay, thanks. It is all about how someone says anything. Story 92. Depends on the context. I do not like it because a guy I knew in high school would call me buddy in a condescending tone. However, people legitimately use it as a friendly term. Story 93. When I was a child, my father would call me bud or buddy when he was mad at me or chastising me, so I have very negative associations with it. This was in Central Texas, if that matters. Anyway, it was far from Canada. Story 94. Buddy is not accepted under any context unless we are really close, and even then, it is very limited. Bud is acceptable if we have met briefly at least once, even if we do not yet know each other's names, but only to a very limited extent. Aside from that, I attempt to stay neutral unless they do something foolish or directly disrespectful. Story 95. Back in high school, we hated hearing the word friend so much we used to say this every time someone called us or our friend's friend. I quote, "Friends are friends and pals are pals, but close friends sleep together." Then we'd all burst out laughing at the person who said friend. They usually learned quickly not to call us friend because we'd say it loud enough that they would be embarrassed since everyone would look their way. The good old days when you could have fun and not get in trouble for every little thing. Story 96. From that moment on, until they do something that annoys me, I would call them buddy. I would stop calling them buddy if they became annoying and start calling them guy, regardless of gender, specifically my guy. Story 97. Indifference sometimes depends on the age of the person doing it. If someone is younger than me, I would not like it. Story 98. Tone matters for me. If it is friendly, I am fine with it, but if someone is acting tough, I do not like it. My sister's boyfriend gets really angry when anyone says it because it is treated like fighting words on his blue-collar job. Story 99. If it is of a friendly and respectful nature, just smile and give a thumbs up. If it is of a sarcastic or hostile nature, I will just say, "I am not your buddy." Story 100. I find it off-putting. If they call me buddy or guy, I take it to mean that they never took the time to mentally note my name. If we have never met before, I take it to mean they want me to think they are already my friend, as a lead-in before asking me to do something for them that I would not do for a stranger. Story 101. I call every friend mate. I call my kids buddy. I think it might be an age thing. I might reply, "I am 39. That is a little too old to be called buddy." Story 102. No reaction. Obviously, they are feeling insecure or emasculated in some way that makes them feel the need to be condescending towards me in order to redress the balance. I am not getting pulled into the trap of justifying myself to someone who already feels threatened by me. Story 103. It is pretty aggressive and disrespectful and does not set a good tone. Unless it is the person at the halal cart. Somehow it just feels more genuine. Not sure why. Story 104. I am a very short man, so I am called that quite often. If I react to what they say, it proves to them that I am immature, young, and reactive. If I ignore it, I prove to them that I am weak and emasculated. There is no winning. I ignore it and move on. Story 105. I don't mind either of those too much, but when someone calls me kid, it definitely makes me spin out for a few fractions of a second, even now in my mid-30s. It's been this way ever since I was about 16. I know most people don't mean any harm, but if you are calling me kid, you obviously know nothing about me. I have hardly ever been a kid. I grew up entirely too fast. I felt self-conscious and exposed any time I released inhibition or was seen just living in the moment. I have seldom had the luxury of simply being without the added burden of wondering how exactly to be. Once you ask that question, it is already over. It has been like that since I was about 7. I am still working on it, obviously, because that is what non-kids do. But it very much still requires that I stop talking for a second before dressing down my seniors and embarrassing them publicly over just a word, so that is what I do. I take a second and get out of there at the soonest opportunity. Kid? Not me. Story 106. I call everyone sir and ma'am for this reason. If I am called buddy, I reply with yes, sir. It sets a tone of respect that I want to receive in return. Story 107. A man in a wine bar in Saratoga was upset because I called him buddy. I should have called him a rude person instead. Story 108. To be honest, if I am on a work call and they call me buddy in a superior way, and they are not 60, wealthy, or very nice, I will get offended or deepen my voice to sound older. Story 109. They are literally just trying to be nice. I cannot even imagine the level of insecurity it would take to be offended by this. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.